The auction house buzzed with the clatter of metal chairs, murmurs of low-bidding farmers, and the occasional bark echoing off concrete walls. Dust swirled in pale shafts of sunlight cutting through the high windows, and the scent of hay, oil, and sweat hung heavy in the air. One by one, animals were brought out and paraded like forgotten furniture, livestock sold off without a flicker of emotion. But in the far corner, a single steel cage sat untouched. Unlike the others, this one had no movement, no handler standing proud beside it. Inside, huddled against rusted bars, was a German shepherd in bad shape. His front leg was held awkwardly off the ground, his fur matted with dried blood. One eye was swollen shut, his ribs visible beneath the filth. Still, he sat with a rigid, unnatural stillness, as if he'd already accepted the world no longer had a place for him. The auctioneer hesitated before calling out. Next, lot 47. Injured male shepherd, unknown history. Starting bid, $10. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, might as well toss him in the trash. Another barked a cruel laugh. No hands rose. The man behind the mic cleared his throat. 10, 5, anyone? The silence felt colder than any winter chill. Then, a creak. A chair scraped gently across the concrete. From the back row, a figure slowly stood. The man wore a long, sun-faded coat, its collar turned up. A dusty ball cap shaded most of his face. He said nothing, just raised one hand, palm steady, eyes fixed not on the crowd or the auctioneer, but on the dog. The room fell still. Even the mocking whispers stopped. The auctioneer blinked in surprise, then nodded quietly. Sold. For a second, nothing changed. Then, the dog's good eye opened, just slightly, and turned toward the man. Not with hope, not with trust, but with the faintest flicker of awareness. Of something almost forgotten. Something like being seen. Daniel Cole didn't make a habit of showing up anywhere he wasn't absolutely needed. The world had taught him how to disappear in plain sight, a skill he'd refined over years of combat and years more of quietly trying to forget it. At 36, he looked older than his age suggested. The kind of man whose eyes never stopped scanning, even when standing still. A former army medic, Daniel had seen too many lives end with the sound of helicopters fading and the smell of dirt and blood in the air. He'd saved some. Lost more. One particular loss, one he never talked about, left a fracture in him that never quite healed. Since returning home, he had learned to keep to himself. A rundown trailer just outside of town became his sanctuary. No neighbors, no noise. Just trees, silence, and his own thoughts, which grew heavier with every passing year. Most days he did odd jobs, roof repairs, welding, fixing old engines, just enough to buy groceries and keep the lights on. He avoided conversation when he could, avoided town even more. But one night, while scrolling through local listings for tools, a short post caught his attention: injured working dog, last call at livestock auction. Unclaimed. It didn't say much. No name. No history. No photo. Just those few words. But something about it lodged in Daniel's chest like a shard of glass. Maybe it was the word working. Maybe it was last call. Or maybe it was the way it sounded, like the dog had already been written off, forgotten, discarded like so many things that had served their purpose. Daniel knew that feeling. He hadn't planned to go. But when the sun came up, his boots were already on, and his truck rumbled to life without a second thought. He didn't go looking for hope. He wasn't expecting redemption. He just went because something about that post, about a broken creature left behind, felt like looking in a mirror. Before we go any further into this powerful journey, take a moment with us. If this story already has your heart stirring, if you've ever believed in second chances or felt the weight of being unseen, please hit the like button. It helps more people find this story, and it tells the world these kinds of voices matter. We'd also love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Whether you're in a small town or a big city, stories like this connect us all. And if you've ever had a moment where you saw something broken and chose not to look away, this story is for you. Let's keep moving forward together. What happens next will stay with you for a long, long time. The bidding ended, but the real struggle had only just begun. When Daniel approached the cage, the dog didn't move. No wag of the tail, no lift of the head, just a low, rasping breath and a body frozen with fear. His injured leg shook uncontrollably, and each shallow inhale made his ribs expand like broken bellows. Daniel crouched low, saying nothing. He simply opened the cage door slowly, careful not to let the metal scrape. Still, the dog tried to press himself deeper into the corner, as if he could disappear inside the steel. "You don't have to walk," Daniel murmured, voice low and steady. "We'll take it slow." He slid his arms beneath the trembling animal with practiced care, mindful of every whimper and flinch. The dog was light, far too light. Bones pressed through his coat like the shell of a creature already halfway gone. Daniel cradled him gently, moving as if carrying something sacred. The ride back was quiet, the truck rattling over dirt roads as the sun began to dip below the trees. The dog lay curled on an old folded blanket on the passenger seat, his eyes open but distant, every muscle still tight. When they got home, Daniel opened the trailer door and gave the dog space. No leash. No force. He just waited. Eventually, the dog limped inside, moving with painful slowness to the far corner of the living room, where he collapsed beside an old wood-burning stove. He didn't sleep. Just stared. Unblinking. Hollow. Daniel placed a bowl of food and water nearby, not too close. Then he sat down across the room and began talking. Not loudly. Not expecting anything. He talked about the auction, about how the truck barely made it home, about the sound the stove made when it cracked. About Afghanistan. About silence. The dog didn't respond. But Daniel didn't stop. "You're safe now," he whispered after a while, voice nearly lost in the stillness. "Even if you don't believe it yet." And with that, he let the silence return. Not as an absence, but as a beginning. It was 2 days before Daniel could convince the dog to step into the truck again. Even then, it wasn't by command or coaxing. It was patience, waiting quietly with the passenger door open while the dog, injured leg trembling, finally chose to climb in. No leash. No pressure. Just time. They pulled into the gravel lot behind the small-town clinic where Daniel had called ahead. He didn't give many details over the phone, but the voice on the other end, warm, no nonsense, told him to come in right away. Inside, Dr. Mia Alvarez greeted them with a calm nod. She was in her early 30s, auburn hair pulled back in a neat braid, dark circles beneath kind, observant eyes. She didn't rush forward or speak too loudly. Instead, she lowered herself slowly to the dog's eye level and waited, letting him sniff the air between them. "You've been through something, haven't you?" she murmured softly. The exam room was quiet except for the rustle of paper and the click of latex gloves. Daniel stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes never leaving the dog, who now lay still on the table, breathing unevenly. Dr. Alvarez worked gently, her tone clinical but laced with concern. "He's underweight. Old fracture in the front leg, was never set properly. Scar tissue around the neck, looks like from a shock collar. Multiple healed lacerations. All consistent with long-term stress, maybe abuse. But..." She stopped, running a scanner slowly along the dog's shoulder. A soft beep. She turned to the small monitor and waited. Then blinked. "Well, he's chipped." The screen displayed a number, followed by a name. Echo. Property of U.S. Military, K-9 Division. Status, retired/decommissioned. Daniel stared at the name. Echo. He tried saying it under his breath. The dog flinched slightly but didn't look away. Dr. Alvarez read further. Bomb Detection Unit. Afghanistan and Iraq. Discharged after a failed mission. Says here he panicked, refused to enter a marked building. The report blamed handler disobedience. Resulted in an explosion, 2 injuries. She looked at Daniel carefully. That's all it says. Daniel's face didn't change, but inside, something cracked open. He knew what that kind of report meant. 1 paragraph to define a career. 1 mistake to erase a lifetime of service. He didn't need the rest of the story. He'd lived enough of his own to recognize the truth hiding between the lines. Echo wasn't broken. He'd been blamed for surviving. Daniel reached out slowly, placing his hand on the dog's back. The fur was rough, the bones still sharp underneath. "We don't leave each other behind," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone. Echo didn't move. But for the first time since the auction, he closed his eyes. The days that followed unfolded slowly, like the turning of a page Daniel had read before but never truly understood. He didn't force anything. He just showed up, a bowl of food placed at a respectful distance, a cup of black coffee in hand, and the low murmur of his voice sharing fragments of old memories to the quiet room. At first, Echo wouldn't eat until Daniel left the room. The moment the trailer door clicked shut, Daniel could hear the soft scrape of the bowl moving. But after a week of this rhythm, same time, same place, Echo began to take tentative bites even with Daniel still there, sitting cross-legged a few feet away, head down, pretending not to notice. Then came a moment so small, it would have been missed by anyone else. Echo's tail moved. Not a wag, not quite. Just a twitch. A ripple of curiosity or peace, Daniel couldn't tell. But it was something. A spark. Encouraged, Daniel began to introduce short walks, not with a leash, but side by side, on the trail that led behind the trailer into a line of tall pines. Echo would follow at a distance at first, glancing back often, ears alert. But each day, the space between them grew smaller. Daniel spoke as they walked, sometimes out loud, sometimes not. There was a comfort in the presence, no judgment, no pressure. Just 2 damaged souls sharing the silence. One morning, just as they reached the clearing where the trees opened to a patch of sky, a gunshot cracked faintly in the distance, likely a farmer's warning shot or early season hunting. Echo dropped instantly to the ground, body rigid, breathing sharp and rapid. His eyes went wild. Legs frozen. Daniel knew the look. He didn't rush. Didn't call. He knelt slowly to Echo's level, hands open, his own breath slow and deep. "You're all right," he said gently. "We're not there anymore." He reached out carefully, laying one hand on the ground to anchor them both. "Can you feel that? The dirt? The wind? That means we're here now. Not then." Echo's ears twitched. His eyes shifted, unsure but listening. Daniel continued with the grounding techniques that had gotten him through 1,000 dark moments. "Name 5 things you can see," he whispered, as if saying it to himself. "4 you can touch. 3 you can hear." Echo didn't understand the words, but the tone, the steadiness of them, began to pull him back. His breathing slowed. The terror in his muscles began to ease. Minutes passed before Echo stood again. He didn't run. He didn't shake. He simply stepped closer, brushing against Daniel's side, then continued forward, just a few feet ahead this time. Daniel watched him, heart tight. It wasn't a victory parade. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Back at the trailer, Echo lay down beside Daniel's feet for the first time. Not out of exhaustion or habit, but choice. Daniel didn't move. He just let the moment settle, like soft ash on still water. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. It didn't take long for whispers to travel through the small town of Elmsfield. That's how it always went: quiet glances in the grocery store, low murmurs at the gas station, a lingering look from behind a cafe window. People noticed things out here. And when Daniel started showing up with a large, scarred German Shepherd riding shotgun in his old truck, curiosity turned quickly to suspicion. "That's the dog from the explosive unit, right?" someone whispered near the feed store. "I heard he attacked his own handler overseas," another added, shaking their head. "Should have been put down." Rumors had a way of snowballing when fed with fear. Echo's stiff posture, the visible scars across his body, and the way he stuck close to Daniel's side only fueled the gossip. Folks didn't see the healing, they only saw the damage. Daniel, never one to explain himself, didn't bother to correct them. But he did start visiting town less and less. He picked up supplies quickly, paid in cash, and avoided unnecessary talk. He didn't want to put Echo, or anyone else, through another stare-down in a parking lot. But the tension followed him like a shadow. One afternoon, while Daniel was filling up his truck, the sheriff pulled in beside him. Sheriff Leland Brooks was an old-school type, calm, measured, and not easily rattled. He didn't come out to intimidate. He simply leaned on the truck hood, tipped his hat, and said, "You're making folks nervous, Daniel." Daniel glanced over but said nothing. Brooks continued, tone casual but deliberate. "Some people think you're hiding something dangerous out there. Say that dog's unstable. That you're unwell." Daniel tightened his grip on the gas pump but kept his voice low. "He's not dangerous. He's just been through hell." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "So have you." He pushed off the hood and added, "I'm not here to judge. Just, be careful who you trust. Not everyone around here believes in second chances." As the sheriff drove away, Daniel looked over at Echo, sitting calmly in the passenger seat, eyes alert and steady. Let them talk, he thought. He knew the truth. And that was enough. The quiet held for only a few more weeks, until the past came back in the form of a name Daniel had hoped to never hear again. Logan Briggs. Former military contractor. Once a decorated K-9 handler, now a man with a reputation as dark as the rumors swirling around him. Daniel had only met him in passing years ago, enough to remember the arrogance in his walk and the way the dogs under his command always looked afraid to breathe. And now, Briggs was back in Elmsfield. Daniel saw him before he heard him. It happened on a dull afternoon. Daniel had driven into town for supplies, Echo sitting calmly in the passenger seat of the truck, window cracked slightly. They were parked near the hardware store when a voice cut through the late-day air like a blade. "Well, I'll be damned." Daniel turned. Logan Briggs stood at the curb, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Echo. He looked rougher now, gray creeping into his beard, a weight in his stance that wasn't there before. But his eyes burned with the same cold control. "That's my dog," he said, stepping forward. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Daniel stepped between them instantly. "He's not your dog." Briggs smirked, but there was venom in it. "He was mine before the army tossed him. That mutt failed in the field and got people hurt. I trained him, I bled for him. I've got paperwork, proof he was mishandled when they cut him loose. I can take him back legally." Daniel didn't flinch. "You had your chance. Now he's with someone who actually gives a damn." Briggs leaned in, voice dropping. "You think you're saving him? You're just prolonging the inevitable. That animal's a liability. Dangerous. I'll get him back. One way or another." Then he walked off without waiting for a reply. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Neither could Echo. The dog paced near the door, his ears twitching at every creak of the wind. His body was on alert, tail stiff, gaze always locked on the entrance. For the first time, Echo didn't rest. He guarded. Over the next few days, Daniel began to notice signs. A black SUV parked across the road. A drone buzzing quietly near the trees. Footsteps outside the trailer late at night, fading before Daniel could reach the door. Once, he found a boot print in the mud, too large to be his. Echo responded to it all like a soldier returning to the front. He stayed near Daniel constantly, eyes always scanning, growling low and constant when strangers passed. Daniel moved his bed closer to the front room and started keeping a loaded pistol on the nightstand. They said trauma recognized trauma. But so did predators. Daniel didn't need Echo's scars explained. He could see the tension in the dog's body shift every time a diesel engine passed by. He could feel the way Echo's breathing slowed when Daniel placed a hand on his back, an anchor in a storm he'd been forced to weather too many times before. Briggs hadn't gone away. He was circling. And this time, Daniel wasn't just protecting Echo. He was preparing for a fight. It was late one evening when Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Mia Alvarez. "You need to see this. Tonight." He drove straight to the clinic, heart thudding with a quiet dread he couldn't explain. When he stepped into the back office, Mia was already at her desk, a stack of worn, off-the-record military documents spread out like a puzzle. "I pulled some strings," she said quietly. "Talked to someone I knew who still works in military records. These were never supposed to be released." Daniel glanced down. The name Echo appeared at the top of each page, along with handler reports, mission logs, and disciplinary orders. But it was one report in particular that stole his breath. The mission Echo was discharged for. It wasn't a failure. It was defiance. According to the record, Echo was ordered to enter a building during a bomb sweep, but refused. Briggs reported it as disobedience and deemed him unfit for service. What the file didn't say, but a footnote from a medic confirmed, was that civilians were inside. Children. Echo sensed something. Briggs insisted on pushing forward. Echo didn't. Minutes later, the building exploded. Briggs blamed Echo. Called him broken, dangerous. And just like that, the dog who had saved lives was labeled a liability and discarded. Daniel stared at the page in silence. "That's not a failure," he muttered. "That's instinct. That's loyalty." Mia nodded. "He did the right thing, and he paid for it." Daniel's mind drifted back, to his own deployment. To the moment he went against a direct command to save a fellow soldier bleeding out in the dust. He'd saved a life, but carried the weight of that choice every day since. The guilt. The isolation. The punishment that didn't come through official channels, but through distance. Silence. He looked at Echo, lying at his feet, head resting on crossed paws, eyes alert but calm. They weren't just alike. They were mirrors, punished not for weakness, but for choosing humanity over orders. Daniel reached down, resting a hand on Echo's back. "They broke us because we wouldn't break others," he whispered. And for the first time, he said the dog's name with pride. "Echo, you did the right thing." It happened outside the general store, just past noon on a warm, cloudless day. Daniel had stopped by for supplies, Echo at his side, calm and attentive as always. They'd just exited the store when a familiar voice sliced through the air like a blade. "I told you this wasn't over." Logan Briggs. He stormed across the lot, eyes locked on Echo. People turned, some recognizing him, most unsure. Echo immediately stepped in front of Daniel, posture alert but composed, his body tense yet unmoving. Briggs didn't hesitate. He lunged, reaching for Echo's collar. Echo didn't snap. He didn't growl. Instead, he stepped sideways in a clean, practiced maneuver, placing himself between Daniel and Briggs, body squared, eyes unblinking. It was not the reaction of a wild or unstable dog, it was controlled, intentional. Protective. "Get out of the way!" Briggs shouted, raising his hand as if to strike. "Don't," Daniel warned, stepping back. That's when the crowd reacted. Mark from the feed store shouted, "Hey! Leave them alone!" Clara from the diner moved closer, pulling out her phone, already recording. Briggs froze for a split second, but it was enough. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up fast, tires crunching. Sheriff Leland Brooks stepped out, firm and steady. "Briggs," he said coldly. "Step back. Now." Briggs turned, scoffing. "This is my dog. He was stolen." "Funny," Brooks replied, holding up a folded paper, "because I've got a signed restraining order filed against you, last year, by another ex-handler. You weren't supposed to be anywhere near military canines, current or retired." Briggs' bravado cracked just slightly. He hesitated, jaw tight. "Hands where I can see them," the sheriff ordered. As the cuffs clicked shut, murmurs rose among the crowd. Not judgment, support. One woman approached Daniel with a small nod. "That dog saved you," she said. "And you saved him." Echo stood tall beside Daniel, calm and unwavering. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel like an outsider in town. He felt seen. They both did. The weeks after Briggs' arrest passed in a blur of relief, quiet, and a new kind of purpose Daniel hadn't felt in years. Dr. Mia was the first to say it out loud. "We could do more," she said, standing beside Daniel one afternoon as Echo lay in the grass near the clinic, the sun warming his patched coat. "There are more dogs like him. And more people like you." Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked down at Echo, calm, steady, alive in a way he hadn't been before. Maybe he had been waiting for someone to say it. Maybe he just needed time to believe it. Echo Haven began as a humble idea, a small program built on healing, for veterans like Daniel and dogs like Echo, discarded, misunderstood, but still full of fight and quiet loyalty. They started small. One trailer. A fenced-in acre of land behind the clinic. A donated shed converted into a training room. Dr. Mia reached out to former shelters and military contacts. Daniel handled the structure, the fieldwork, the long, slow walks with dogs that wouldn't look anyone in the eye. Echo remained the center of it all. His name was now on the sign. His story, the reason others began to believe their own healing was possible. When the local VFW hosted their annual Veterans Day gathering, they invited Daniel to speak. He almost declined. But Echo nudged him gently when the invitation arrived, as if knowing he needed to show up, for himself, and for others. That November afternoon was crisp and clear. Folding chairs lined the community park. Flags flapped gently in the breeze. And as Daniel stepped onto the small wooden stage, Echo at his side, all eyes turned to them, not with fear, but with something closer to admiration. Daniel didn't say much. "I used to think broken things didn't belong anywhere," he said. "But then I met someone who'd been labeled broken, too. Turns out, we just needed each other." He paused, hand resting lightly on Echo's back. "We didn't need fixing. We just needed someone to believe we were still worth something." Afterward, children ran to Echo, kneeling in the grass to pet his ears. Veterans approached Daniel, some with handshakes, others with nothing more than a silent nod. One man, eyes glassy, pressed a trembling hand to Daniel's shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, back at Echo Haven, Daniel stood watching the sun go down, the sky streaked in soft purples and golds. Echo lay nearby, breathing slow and deep, a dog at peace. This wasn't redemption wrapped in speeches or headlines. It was something quieter. More sacred. Healing didn't always arrive with answers, it arrived with connection, patience, and purpose. And in that moment, Daniel knew. They hadn't just survived. They'd started something that would outlive them both. It was late one evening when Daniel checked the old metal mailbox at the edge of the property. Mixed in with local flyers and a bill or two was an envelope, thick, heavy, and official. The seal stamped on the back stopped him cold, U.S. Military, confidential correspondence. He brought it inside and sat at the table, Echo rising slowly from his spot by the door. The dog padded over, alert, sensing something had shifted. Daniel broke the seal and unfolded the letter. It was brief, written in a clipped, formal tone. But the message hit harder than anything he expected. "We're trying to locate a dog formerly designated Echo 9. His last deployment raised internal concerns. A former handler, Lieutenant James Reardon, has resurfaced and is requesting contact. There may be more at stake than originally reported." Daniel's eyes froze on the name, Reardon. Echo's ears perked. Then his muscles tensed. His eyes locked on the letter in Daniel's hand, and for the first time in weeks, a deep growl rumbled low in his chest. Daniel looked down at him, heart heavy. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If Echo's past had been buried, someone was now digging it back up, and this time, the truth might cost more than scars. He folded the letter slowly, exhaling through clenched teeth. They thought Echo's story was over, he whispered, hand resting on the dog's head. But it was just the beginning.